Part 2 of the Story of Mary MacLane. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Kristen Hughes. The Story of Mary MacLane, Part 2. January 15th. So then, yes, I find myself at this stage of womankind and 19 years, a genius, a thief, a liar, a general moral vagabond, a fool more or less, and a philosopher of the peripatetic school. Also, I find that even this combination cannot make one happy. It serves, however, to occupy my versatile mind, to keep me wondering what it is a kind devil has in store for me. A philosopher of my own peripatetic school, hour after hour I walk over the desolate sand and dreariness among the tiny hills and gulches on the outskirts of this mining town. In the morning, in the long afternoon, in the cool of the night. And hour after hour as I walk, through my brain some long, long pageants march. The pageant of my fancies. The pageant of my unparalleled egotism, the pageant of my unhappiness, the pageant of my minute analyzing, the pageant of my peculiar philosophy, the pageant of my dull, dull life, and the pageant of the possibilities. We three go out on the sand and barrenness. My wooden heart, my good young woman's body, my soul. We go there and contemplate the long sandy wastes, the red, red line on the sky at the setting of the sun, the cold, gloomy mountains under it, the ground without a weed, without a grass blade even in their season, for they have years ago been killed off by the sulphur smoke from the smelters. So this sand and barrenness forms the setting for the personality of me. January 16th. I feel about 40 years old. Yet I know my feeling is not the feeling of 40 years. These are the feelings of miserable, wretched youth. Every day the atmosphere of a house becomes unbearable, so every day I go out to the sand and barrenness. It is not cold, neither is it mild. It is gloomy. I sit for 2 hours on the ground by the side of a pitiable small narrow stream of water. It is not even a natural stream. I dare say it comes from some mine among the hills. But it is well enough that the stream is not natural, when you consider the sand and barrenness. It is singularly appropriate, and I am singularly appropriate to all of them. It is good, after all, to be appropriate to something, to be in touch with something, even sand and barrenness. The sand and barrenness is old, oh, very old. You think of this when you look at it. What should I do if the earth were made of wood with a paper sky? I feel about 40 years old. And again I say I know my feeling is not the feeling of 40 years. These are the feelings of miserable, wretched youth. Still more pitiable than the sand and barrenness and the poor unnatural stream is the dry, warped cemetery where the dry, warped people of Butte bury their dead friends. It is a source of satisfaction to me to walk down to this cemetery and contemplate it, and revel in its utter pitiableness. It is more pitiable than I and my sand and barrenness and my poor unnatural stream, I say over and over, and take my comfort. Its condition is more forlorn than that of a woman young and alone. It is unkempt. It is choked with dust and stones. The few scattered blades of grass look rather ashamed to be seen growing there. A great many of the headstones are of wood and are in a shameful state of decay. Those that are of stone are still more shameful in their hard brightness. The dry, warped friends of the dry, warped people of Butte are buried in this dusty, dreary, wind-havocked waste. They are left here and forgotten. The devil must rejoice in this graveyard, and I rejoice with the devil. It is something for me to contemplate, that is more pitiable than I and my sand and barrenness and my unnatural stream. I rejoice with the Devil. The inhabitants of this cemetery are forgotten. I have watched once the burying of a young child. Every day for a fortnight afterward I came back, and I saw the mother of the child there. She came and stood by the small new grave. After a few days more she stopped coming. I knew the woman and went to her house to see her. She was beginning to forget the child. She was beginning to take up again the thread of her life where she had let it go. The thread of her life is involved in the divorces and fights of her neighbors. Out in the warped graveyard her child is forgotten, and presently the wooden headstone will begin to decay. But the worms will not forget their part. They have eaten the small body by now and enjoyed it. Always worms enjoy a body to eat. And also the Devil rejoiced, and I rejoiced with the Devil. They are more pitiable, I insist, than I and my sand and barrenness. The mother whose life is involved in divorces and fights, and the worms eating at the child's body, and the wooden headstone which will presently decay. And so the Devil and I rejoice. But no matter how ferociously pitiable is the dried-up graveyard, the sand and barrenness and the sluggish little stream have their own persistent individual damnation. The world is at least so constructed that its treasures may be damned each in a different manner and degree. I feel about 40 years old, and I know my feeling is not the feeling of 40 years. They do not feel any of these things at 40. At 40 the fire has long since burned out. When I am 40 I shall look back to myself and my feelings at 19, and I shall smile. Or shall I indeed smile? January 17th. As I have said, I want fame. I want to write such things as compel the admiring acclamations of the world at large, such things as are written but once in years, things subtly but distinctly different from the books written every day. I can do this. Let me but make a beginning, let me but strike the world in a vulnerable spot, and I can take it by storm. Let me but win my spurs, and then you will see me, of womankind and young, valiantly astride a charger riding down the world, with fame following at the charger's heels and the multitudes agape. But oh, more than all this I want to be happy. Fame is indeed benign and gentle and satisfying, but happiness is something at once tender and brilliant beyond all things. I want fame more than I can tell. But more than I want fame, I want happiness. I have never been happy in my weary young life. Think, oh, think of being happy for a year, for a day. How brilliantly blue the sky would be, how swiftly and joyously would the green rivers run, how madly, merrily, triumphant the four winds of heaven would sweep round the corners of the fair earth. What would I not give for 1 day, 1 hour of that charmed thing happiness? What would I not give up? How we eager fools tread on each other's heels, and tear each other's hair and scratch each other's faces in our furious gallop after happiness. For some it is embodied in fame, for some in money, for some in power, for some in virtue, and for me in something very much like love. None of the other fools desires happiness as I desire it. For 1 single hour of happiness I would give up at once these things — fame and money and power and virtue and honor and righteousness and truth and logic and philosophy and genius — the while I would say, what a little, little price to pay for dear happiness. I am ready and waiting to give all that I have to the Devil in exchange for happiness. I have been tortured so long with the dull, dull misery of nothingness all my 19 years. I want to be happy. Oh, I want to be happy. The Devil has not yet come, but I know that he usually comes,